This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. Burma is in a good position to make big gains in Asia's fast-growing markets. But development must include all of society and be sustainable for Burma to reach its goals. That is what the Asian Development Bank said in a recent report. Sin Young Park is an economist with the bank. She says Burma's economic position is strengthened by its natural resources such as oil, gas, and minerals. It also has two large and growing neighbors, India and China. And the nation is young. 1 in 4 of its citizens are under the age of 30. But Burma has a long way to go. After 50 years of military rule, it is one of Asia's poorest countries. Basic infrastructure like roads, bridges, and railways are not developed, and only 30% of rural people have electricity. Burma is trying to increase foreign investment. Its civilian government has struggled with a new foreign investment law. Some versions of the law restricted foreign ownership in some industries and ban it completely in others. Sean Turnell is an economist with Australia's Macquarie University. He said the foreign investment law faced local disapproval or pushback. He said in some cases there appears to be a walling off of some industries to foreigners. For years, Burma's military closely controlled the economy. Relatives and friends of military members received rich contracts. Now, the civilian government wants to expand services and manufacturing. It has considered giving foreign companies low tax rates so they will invest. But experts say this could be a mistake. Sean Turnell says investors are concerned about infrastructure problems, not taxes. Economists also say tax breaks for local businesses may not be the answer either. They say the lack of access to credit for farmers and businesses in Burma is a bigger problem. Reform in Burma is still in the early stages. The country recently announced new rules ending direct government censorship of news media. Reporters now must send censors their work after it is published instead of before. Some reporters say they will wait to see if this means more freedom. Sin Young Park says investors too are waiting to see if reform will succeed. It is really going to take a while, she says, before the investors do believe that this reform is sincere and the government is not going to retrench. For VOA Special English, I'm Laurel Bowman.
This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. Business is the most popular subject for international students in the United States. At last count, 22% of foreign students at American colleges and universities were studying business and management. The Institute of International Education in New York says engineering was the second most popular field. Thomas Kosei is a professor of marketing and business at the University of Richmond in Virginia. He says international students who want to study business need to have good English skills. At the same time, native English speakers who work with foreign companies may need to learn some new communication skills themselves. This is because the world has more non-native speakers of English than native speakers. At the University of Richmond, teams of graduate students work with companies seeking to enter the American market. The students learn about writing market entry studies. The reports are written in English, but Professor Thesse tells his students to consider who will read them. He said his students have to write the report so that it can be understood by someone who is an English speaker but not a native English speaker. For example, he tells his students to avoid jargon and other specialized terms that people might not know in their own language. This can be good advice even when writing for other native speakers. But effective communication involves more than just words. Kay Westerfield is director of the International Business Communication Program at the University of Oregon. She says you must have the language skills as well as cultural intelligence. Cultural intelligence means the need to consider local behaviors in everything from simple handshakes to speaking to large groups. Still, Kay Westerfield says the ability of foreign workers to speak English is becoming more important to companies looking to off-source operations to other countries. Also, she says English skills often provide a competitive edge for business students when they seek jobs. She said, as one business student in West Africa put it, English is a lifeline. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. We offer live English lessons Monday through Friday at the VOA Learning English page on Facebook. You can also read and listen to our programs and find activities for English learners at voaspecialenglish.com. And we have podcasts on iTunes.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report. In Britain, demonstrators recently protested outside the Treasury to call on the world's richest countries to act against tax havens. These are countries or territories that have low tax rates for businesses. Companies can place their profits in tax havens to avoid the higher tax rates of countries where they earned the income. An investigation found that tax havens cost Africa $38 billion every year in lost taxes. Former United Nations Secretary General Kofi Annan led the investigation. The demonstrators at Britain's Treasury called on Chancellor George Osborne to discuss the practice with finance ministers from other wealthy countries. Melanie Ward is with the Enough for Everyone If campaign. She said she believes many people in Britain and the world oppose such tax avoidance. Tax havens and low-tax countries like Ireland are popular, but critics of tax havens say big companies transfer profits out of the countries on which their income depends. Ronan Palan is a professor at City University, London. He says capital in some African countries is funding development in other parts of the world because of such transfers. The charity Action Aid says the brewing company SAB Miller uses a complex system of tax havens. It says this system moves profits out of the company's operations in developing countries like Ghana. SAB Miller denies any tax abuses. It says in 2010 it paid about $250 million in corporate taxes in India and sub-Saharan Africa. British Prime Minister David Cameron has promised to discuss the issue of tax havens at the G8 leaders meeting in June. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman.
This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. The highest court in the United States is considering the constitutionality of the new healthcare law. The Supreme Court heard arguments at the end of March over the question of what is called the individual mandate. It is part of the Affordable Care Act, which Congress passed and President Obama signed into law 2 years ago. The individual mandate requires all Americans to buy health insurance by 2014 or face a fine. 26 states and a group representing small businesses say the law is unconstitutional. If the law takes effect, about 30 million Americans not currently covered will have to join the health insurance system. Supporters say this will reduce healthcare costs for all Americans. For opponents, the question is whether the federal government has the right to tell people what they can or cannot do. During arguments, Justice Antonin Scalia put the question this way: "What is left?" he asked. "If the government can do this, what else can it not do?" The Obama administration says the law has already helped millions of Americans. It says over 2 million young people have remained on their parents' health insurance plans since September 2010. Before then, many young people lost health coverage after they left home or reached a certain age. Healthcare costs are growing at a rate that many experts say cannot be supported. The Council of Economic Advisors advises the president on economic issues. It warns that at the current growth rate, healthcare spending will be responsible for 34% of the economy by 2040. Currently, healthcare is almost 1/5 of the economy. That is a big problem for the federal government. It pays for Medicare, health insurance for older adults, and Medicaid, the program for poor people. And as the population ages, more people will depend on these programs. During the oral arguments, Justice Stephen Breyer noted the importance of the issue. He said it shows there is a national problem, one that involves money, cost, and insurance. The High Court is expected to rule on the individual mandate in June, but the effects of the ruling are expected to influence healthcare policy for years to come. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti. For more business news, go to voaspecialenglish.com. From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report in Special English. The International Monetary Fund says worldwide growth is weaker than expected because of economic concerns in Europe and the United States. But there is some positive news. The number of cars being made is on the rise. That is a sign that the world's economy is moving in the right direction. Measuring economic progress, especially for groups like the middle class, is not easy. But a little-known economic indicator is beginning to gain acceptance. The so-called CAR Index is an attempt to measure the world's middle class based on the number of people who own cars. Experts say that the number of people who own cars in the developing world is rapidly increasing. That is because there are about 70 countries with a population of about 3 billion people who are quickly approaching an important income level, $4,000 per person. Experts say when that level is reached, a country's middle class increases very quickly. This rise in average income means greater demand for goods that are considered non-essential. And many of these goods are produced in Japan, Germany, and the United States. The International Monetary Fund says consumer spending in developed nations has fallen since the economic downturn of 2008. The fund's managing director, Christine Lagarde, points to the debt crisis in Europe and problems in the United States economy as threats to the global economy. Growth could be slower than the IMF had predicted earlier in the year. On the other hand, recent studies show consumer spending in developing countries has increased 3 times faster than in developed economies. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Presutti.